Never miss an episode of the Final Furlong podcast. Subscribe now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And now, here's your host, Emmet Kennedy.
Welcome to the Final Furlong Podcast and our first RaceiQ Data Special of the new flat season. As always, lead data analyst from RaceiQ, Paige Fuller, is alongside us. She's going to steer us through the major Group 1s at Epsom, the Derby, the Oaks, and the Coronation Cup. And we'll start with the Derby because I think we definitely need a bit of help clearing up this picture page. The Lion in Winter himself is just the obvious place to start, really. He was the favourite for the Derby before the Dante. He drifts out to 6-1 after it, the third, fourth favourite. Then he comes right back into favouritism, then goes all the way back out to 10-1, and now he's back into about 6-1, despite the fact that Aidan O'Brien said he thinks it's going to be difficult for Ryan Moore to get off Delacroix. What does the RaceiQ data tell us about the Lion in Winter, but also what does it tell us about the wider picture of this year's Derby?
Yeah, well, I think, as you say, it's a very competitive renewal, isn't it? And, you know, I think going through the data, it's just like, it's kind of frazzled me more than anything else. Because actually, like, you suddenly you look at one horse and you're like, oh yeah, actually, like, why did I ever not think this had a, like, winning chance, not just a place chance? You know, so, yeah, it's quite an interesting picture, but I think, you know, the annoying thing is we've only got 2 track races for the Lion Winter specifically. But my gut feeling, using the data combined with what we visually saw in the Dante, I think he's a miler. I think Aidan O'Brien will be sat there cursing and lamenting the fact that this horse didn't get to run in the Guineas. Personally, I know it's controversial, but you know, when he won at York last summer, he just was able to jump and travel and maintain that speed really strongly to the end of the race. You know, and you look at, okay, maybe he was too fresh at York, so you can forgive a horse one run where they run a bit, but clearly in the Dante, he just wanted to jump and bowl and travel. And as soon as Ryan Moore let his head go, he had no turn of foot. So my concern is the fact that actually, you know, again, you look at the sort of his peak stride length at York was the second largest of the field, because he was able to lengthen and just keep rolling. And his top speed was 41.29 miles per hour when he won at York, which is the second quickest of the race. You know, way quick, well, quicker-ish, not way quicker, but quicker than Ruling Court. You know, again, when you match up those 2 races, Ruling Court was so green. You know, you watch it back and Will Buick was constantly just having to grab hold of him, give him a little slap down the shoulder because they were just travelling and rolling. And Lion in Winter was really impressive, but, you know, they've got to get him to settle. And will he be able to quicken in that way? Because his top speed was only 39.62 miles per hour in the Dante, which granted it's over further, but I don't know. My gut feeling is actually this is a horse that's probably going to be better around sort of a mile to mile 2. He's going to be a longer distance, sort of proper middle to longer distance horse, in my opinion.
Well, that's the fascinating thing with this time of year, is that even the smartest don't entirely know what the best distance for the horse is going to be. And the best recent example of this is Diego Velázquez. Last year, they ran him in the French 2000 Guineas, the French Derby, having run him he was initially favoured for the futurity. It didn't quite work out for him on the bad ground. But they sent him off 2-1 favourite for the Ascot Derby, for the King Edward VII Stakes. And yet, he completely bombs out. And then they realise, oh, this horse doesn't want to go a mile 4. He wants to come back and trip. And then he bolts up over a mile 1 and bolts up over, well, at least wins impressively over a mile. And that seems to be the distance they're going to try him over now. So you can look at Aidan O'Brien and think, oh, this guy's got all the answers, he knows everything now, but not really until they're on the track. And I think that makes a bit of sense. Tom Siegel has expressed a similar opinion, that he thinks the Lion in Winter is a miler and not actually a middle distance horse. I'm not entirely certain what he is at all. I kind of look back at that York win and wonder, did Ryan just control that from the front brilliantly on a very, very talented horse? But did it make him look a little bit better than he actually is that day? For all that he's undoubtedly extremely talented, was he perhaps a little bit flattered? I just don't get the Auguste Rodin, City of Troy vibes off of this fella. Like, defeat was out of the question for them, despite the fact that they had blown out on their seasonal debut. He had a better seasonal debut than either of them. I don't quite get that City of Troy, Auguste Rodin vibe. And maybe the reason for that, Paige, is because he's by See the Stars. He's not by a Coolmore Stallion, so they're not incentivized to be telling us, oh, he's a machine, he can't be beaten. Not that I don't think that City of Troy was a superstar. He was. And I think Auguste Rodin was extremely talented as well. But this is more open than it looks, put it that way. I'm not entirely certain that this fella's just going to repeat the process from the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I think you're so right in the sense that Coolmore are very good at playing the press and trying to create the narrative they want.
They're the best at it. They're the best at it.
and you know, maybe they're completely pulling the wool over our eyes with this horse and thinking, okay, he's not necessarily going to join our stallion ranks, but you know, let's keep the prices up in the air whilst Ryan picks the horse, because ultimately Ryan is actually judge of what he feels underneath him. You know, if he thinks, I mean, because I have my own question marks over Delacroix as well, so it'll be really interesting. And I know that everyone's waiting to see which one Ryan Moore picks. But if Ryan Moore picks the Lion and Winter who has inferior form to Delacroix, you know that he's picking for a reason. Do you know what I mean? So he's not shown enough. As you say, he was a very special looking horse at York, and horses it's so easy to draw a line. It's harder to draw a line through this run at York in the Dante because he ran so keen. He's stepping up a further 2 furlongs. But they could have worked on that at home, changed his headgear about, and you know, there's so many things that the maestro can do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like everyone else, it's going to be the same in the Oaks when we get onto the Oaks. Like which horse that Ryan Moore rides is kind of key, isn't it?
Well, as a former jockey and as a RaceiQ, as the lead data analyst for RaceiQ, if Ryan Moore chooses the Lion in Winter, is that a major endorsement in the Lion in Winter's claims, or is it telling you that he's not that sure about Delacroix either?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably both. I mean, maybe both. But yeah, that is a really good question. What do you think?
I think the Lion in Winter is priced up like he's a Group 1 winning 2-year-old. And he's not. I think there's just this blind assumption that, oh, well, he would have won the Dewhurst. Maybe. Maybe he would. I don't know. They were going to take him to a sales race. He missed it. They were taking him to the Dewhurst. He missed it. They were taking him to the Guineas. He missed it. He finally runs in the Dante. Aidan O'Brien keeps telling everybody, he sends out all the smoke signals. He's not ready. He's not ready. He will improve significantly for this. He gets sent off odds on. So that's telling me that, oh no, they really regard this horse very, very highly. Michael Tabor was telling me I wouldn't back him. I think they do hold him in very, very high regard. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's a Derby horse. And then Delacroix, he reminds me a little bit of Anthony Van Dyke in that he's battle-hardened, he's got a lot of class, he's a Derby trial winner. But should he be 3-1? I'm not so sure. Is he going to stay a mile 4? Is he bred for that? He's by Dubawi. Dubawi hated Epsom himself, and the vast majority of his progeny have hated Epsom, except for the 2 fillies in the Oaks last year who fought out to finish together. But he doesn't have a good record as a sire at the track, and Tepin was a brilliant miler. So what do you make of Delacroix?
So Delacroix is a really interesting one, because I think he's obviously one of the most experienced in the race, hasn't he? He comes here, as you say, very battle-hardened. But there are those big question marks. You know, there is a reason why Dubawi has not been able to sire a winner of the Derby yet. So that is the biggest question mark. I think the interesting thing with him is his 2 wins at Leopardstown this season have been very different styles of races. So I think last time he really showed quite an enormous turn of foot. You know, he was really, he really quickened up at the end. I think he hit speeds of over 41 miles an hour in that race. this is probably, I've got so much data to talk about. I'm going to have to make sure that I've got it all lined up at the right time. I'm like, right, come on, get the right thing. I've got my notes, I've got the websites, I've got my spreadsheets, right, get Delacroix open. But yeah, sorry, got there now. So he very much, outstayed them, I think, at Leopardstown in March, and he only hit speeds of sort of 39 miles an hour in that race, because it turned into, he just galloped, and you look at him against Lambourn when they ran against each other, and more classic, didn't he? Jumped off, he got himself established in the lead, dictated it, steadied it a bit, and then quickened at the end, and Lambourn just couldn't quicken enough to catch him. But he's still quicken and maintain that very well to the end. And I think that's key with Epsom, is that ability to not just have one injection of pace, but being able to quicken up, because they obviously swing off the bend, don't they? And they quicken up quite a long way from home. So they have to be able to quicken and maintain that. And I think Delacroix showed that at Leopardstown. But then he also showed that he's got a really rapid turn of foot, which he didn't show as a miler, as a 2-year-old. Like, I think sometimes as a 2-year-old, he looks slightly flat-footed. Like, he certainly never, I think there was only one occasion last season where he actually hit speeds close to what he reached at Leopardstown last time out, where obviously it turned into a complete sprint. But that was, I think it was only his second run at the Curragh that he hit anything like that, and that was over 7 furlongs, not a mile too. So on soft ground, in the futurity, again, I think he just couldn't inject that pace into the race. Like, I think he's the sort of horse that likes to be able to inject the pace in the race, and couldn't do that in the futurity last season on soft ground. But again, is that the Derby coming out of him, where he's quite a fast striding horse? He's a sort of, I think in 5 or 6 of his 7 races, he's been the quickest or the second quickest striding horse. And so does he get stuck in the mud? Like, is he the sort of horse that will want to bounce off that quick ground, inject that pace into the race, and really scamper along and quicken up? And again, that looking outside the window today, I'm only sort of an hour from Epsom, an hour and 15 from Epsom, seeing rather wet windows from the rain that's sort of coming our way.
Oh, is it lashing?
It's not lashing, but the windows it's definitely raining. And, it's going to be a real balance for the Clarks at Epsom with racing on the Friday. If it certainly went good to soft, maybe slower side of good to soft, I think that would be a big negative for Delacroix as well.
Okay, there's a slight caveat. Now, we need to bear in mind the fact that the sister is by Galileo. But Grateful did win over a mile 6 in group company on Arc weekend on soft ground at Paris Longchamp. But Grateful was by Galileo. So maybe the Galileo influence, 1, kicked in stamina, and 2, kicked in that ability to handle the softer ground. It does, though, mean that perhaps Tepin is able to give Tepin's progeny, and it's a real shame that horse is no longer with us. Especially seeing as Coolmore paid $8 million for the privilege of breeding to her and only got 2 horses out of her. But Grateful will hopefully carry on that bloodline, and hopefully Delacroix will too. But perhaps he's going to be okay on it. I think the fact that he's been beaten on soft ground as a juvenile just means that's a slight concern. There's no doubt in the back of my mind that in terms of the Derby trial performances we've seen, and they've been visually very impressive winners, there's more substance to that win in the Ballysacks. The Joseph O'Brien filly comes out and wins a Group 3. The 2 Aidan O'Brien horses in behind obviously come out and win Derby trials themselves. He himself goes on and wins a Derby trial even more impressively. So there's visual substance and actual form substance to what he's done. But is he, in your expert opinion, let's say the going stays as it is now, it's good. Let's say good to soft, right? It's in and around somewhere there, as they're currently talking to us about it. Does he improve for a mile 4?
I personally would like to say he would. I think, as I say, the way he sustained that turn of foot in the Ballysacks impressed me. And I think he's going to have an even more devastating turn of foot over a mile 4. Because I think, crucially, they'll probably go slightly slower. He's really sharp away out the stalls. Mm-hmm. So in the 0 to 20 data, he's been first or second out the stalls in all bar one of the races we've got for him. Or all bar one of his races, actually, because we've got all the races for him. So that's 6 of 7 races. he was quickest out of stalls. So you can easily see that, you know, barring an awful draw, for example, Ryan Moore can just pop him out and then just dictate in front, because I think he'll get pestered. He might get pestered a little bit. Like, there are lots of horses that race handy, but I can't see anything obvious that would go blazing off in front. And so actually, if he could just get to the front, make sure that they don't go too hard, then I think him turning into the straight, kicking clear, keeping it simple, like that seems like what I would imagine will happen if he were to win the race, if that makes sense.
Okay. So potentially improves, potentially has the explosive turn of foot. There's an awful lot to like about him, except his price. He's 3-1, and he's 3-1. And this is going to go one of two ways. Either he goes 2-1 because Ryan Moore rides him, and there's an immediate overreaction to the fact, oh, this means the Lion and Winter's got no chance. Or Ryan chooses the Lion and Winter, in which case that 3-1 looks very, very short, and he starts wandering. So does he appeal to you as a bet right now? And is it a concern for you as a RaceiQ data analyst, but also as a former jockey? Is it a concern for you that Dubois really struggled at Epsom, with the exception, admittedly, of the Oaks last year?
Yeah, it's such a funny track, isn't it? Because you do just have to be so versatile with your striding, and I think it's something that, like, I'm going to probably cause loads of, like, not confusion, but, you know, we're still exploring this idea of stride pattern and, you know, what suits certain tracks, and, you know, it's an area that we really want to be able to explore further, but we need probably more data. Epsom's a really funny track because it actually, horses don't stride out at Epsom because they go stiff uphill to start with, then they go sharply downhill on a bend, so they're never able to sort of really stride out. But that doesn't mean to say that long striding horses don't suit it there, because City of Troy was a massive striding horse. Yeah. So, you know, it's I like, everyone's going to sit here listening to me being like, well, what's the point in talking about it if you don't know what it means? But I think it's that feeling you get off it as well, isn't it? And Dubois stride really quickly, and lots of people associate that with stamina. So if you stride very quickly, each time you take a stride as a horse, you take a breath in your lungs. So the faster you stride, the more energy you're using. You know, so normally you associate fast striding horses with shorter distances, but Dubois are a bit of an enigma because they tend to stride faster in general than other stallions. Like, he produces fast striding horses. So, you know, people like, I don't know if your listeners will have listened to Kevin Blake doing his stride analysis last year on ITV about, you know, the Oaks winner, and how she was a very fast striding horse and how it was negative for her. But as you say, like, she still won.
Yeah. He wasn't wrong. He was right, but he was wrong in the sense that it didn't pan out the way he thought it was going to. But that's racing. Yeah,
and I think that's the sort of the most difficult thing for me thinking about Dubois is, you know, I don't know whether it is just their style of, you know, the way that they stride so quickly, in which case they are always going to be up against it, or whether, as you say, he's just been unlucky and just, you know, since he's been siring, you know, he's only had X number of opportunities to actually sire a winner of the Derby. Like,
well, I've got a couple of theories to explore on this as well, to a certain extent. Dermot Weld trained the winner last year. Charlie Appleby had the second in the Oaks. That is. How many Dubois has Aidan O'Brien had? Not many. One of them won a Group 1 as a juvenile, the Vincent O'Brien National Stakes for Henry Longfellow. The point I'm making is that there's nobody better at training a Derby winner than Aidan O'Brien, and there's nobody better than preparing a Derby winner than Aidan O'Brien. But he hasn't really had many of Dubois' stock to go to war with, and now he does. And from a very, very young age, this horse will have been galloping on the mock Epsom track they have at Ballydoyle. So he might be a little bit unusual in the sense that he will have had all of that experience of running around the tight turns of their Chester version, the undulation and the tight turns of their Epsom version. So he'll go there very experienced from the Ballydoyle gallops at least. And he goes in there really unexposed, but unusually experienced for the vast majority of horses. Like Pride of Arras is only having his third start. This fellow will be having his seventh. But that's invaluable, particularly at Epsom, given the fact that it's such an unbalanced, undulating track. Like you mentioned Kevin Blake. It's interesting you'd say him, because years ago he told me the first time he walked Epsom, he was like, if I ever get a really good horse, not a hope he'd run him at Epsom. Unless the trainer told him absolutely, definitively, oh yeah, this horse is going to win. No way. It's a crazy track.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound like I'm just sort of sitting on the fence with him, because I think it's that he's just shown so many different signs, hasn't he? That there are so many him, but if he was really as much of a super, and I think basically it doesn't really matter whether you're looking at the data or not. We're all sat here going, Aidan O'Brien isn't banging the door down saying this is the next coming. So if he's not saying that, then what can we make of him as a horse? Because he's done everything that he really should have been. He's done pretty much everything bar a couple of defeats last time, which, yeah.
Excuse me, miss, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is it possible he's not saying that because last year he was telling us it was City of Troy, and he's under no... He got so much criticism for doing that, and I think City of Troy is one of the best horses Aidan O'Brien ever trained. Watch what he did. You can debate amongst yourselves, but I think he was brilliant. I don't think he wants to be saying that this year, and I think he's probably more inclined to just let these horses do their talking on the track. And again, Paige, I'll draw your attention to the fact that this is a horse by Dubawi and not a Coolmore stallion.
Yeah, and I think having come from last year when he was the next best coming, and as you say, he was deserving of it. Like they got it right with him, bar obviously the flop in the Guineas and the Breeders' Cup, but so what? He was still a very impressive racehorse, and I think because we went from that last year where he was just the hype horse, like it's slightly off-putting not having it this year, but I totally understand like your point about why they might not be. But he had excuses for his defeats last season, and I know good horses get, they don't get beat. There's no excuses. But when he was beaten at Leopardstown in September in the Juvenile Stakes, he was just done for toe by the winner, by Green Impact, which granted runs again, but he was done for toe by Green Impact. He completed the final furlong, way quicker than him. He was staying on at the line again with the Futurity Stakes. He couldn't use the speed over a mile on soft ground. I just think that as long as it isn't a completely flat out gallop where he can't use that injection of speed at the right time, I think he's going to be really difficult to beat. But I think the key thing is, I think he has to have it. I think Ryan Moore's going to have to give him a Ryan Moore masterclass ride, though.
Okay, let's put this in context. He's going to be very difficult to beat if Ryan Moore is on him.
Yes.
If he doesn't have the assistance of Ryan Moore, you're not as confident.
Well, double whammy, because, A, Ryan Moore thinks something else is more worth riding, and B, Ryan Moore just has the most magical way of dictating a race and making the race pan out the way he wants it to. And I think if he's picked Delacroix, that's because he knows that he can make the race work out the way that he needs it to.
Yeah,
I think is the kind of real sticking point for me.
I'm sort of flashing back to last year's Derby, and he wasn't stone last round in the final turn, but City of Troy is in a position he can't possibly win from, and yet you just knew deep down, oh, he's going to win. It was extraordinary. It was one of the most extraordinary performances I've ever seen. Okay, I'm not expecting City of Troy-esque, but it might very well be a special performance from Delacroix if Ryan Moore rides. If not, then proceed with caution. By the way, if he doesn't ride him, it doesn't necessarily mean he can't win. This is the thing that's really odd. Aidan O'Brien has won this race with outsiders in the past, very recently, in fact. But it will greatly enhance his opportunity if Ryan is on board. Why is Ruling Court not favourite?
It's a very good question. Do you have an opinion on that? Because I do. I understand why.
I think he's not.
Sorry, I don't understand why.
I think
really.
He's not favourite because he was beaten by the Line in Winter. and the Lion in Winter was favourite, and there's this blind assumption that, oh, well, the Lion in Winter is then, he beat him in the Acomb, therefore he's better than him. First of all, not every horse handles York. It's a great track, but some horses just don't like it there. 2, Ryan dictated that from the front. William's a brilliant jockey. If he could have that back again, I think he would. 3, it was only his second ever run, and he's clearly improved dramatically from 2 to 3. The very fact that William Buick chose to ride Ruling Court in the 2000 Guineas over the dual Group 1 winner and European champion juvenile Shadow of Light, who would go on to be third in the Guineas, tells you how good this horse is. And yet, he's a classic winner. He's 2 from 2 this season. He's by the same sire who won the race a year ago. He's out of a High Chaparral mare, so he should improve for going up in trip. His form from the Guineas has been boosted by the runner-up winning the Irish 2000 Guineas emphatically. And he's second favourite. For a trainer who's won this twice in the last 10 years, I can't understand it.
I think my opinion is that it's the Aidan O'Brien factor as well, isn't it? If Ryan Moore picks the Lion in Winter, I could see Ruling Court becoming favourite because Delacroix drifts. Because I think, as you say, that York form is, I think they'll be able to turn that round. I think, again, go back to the Lion in Winter where I was saying that, you know, he's probably one who's going to jump travel. He's got a high cruising speed. You know, I think he'll be better suited to a mile 2 where he can make more use of his stride and his speed and his cruising speed. I think Ruling Court was just run off his feet. Like, when you visually watch it back, you don't need the data to tell you that when you watch it back, Will Buick was like, he was giving him nudges from like halfway.
Yeah.
Because he just couldn't, he looked green, his legs were all over the place. You know, that's the fastest that Ruling Court's ever been. He hit speeds of over 41 miles an hour in that race. Like, that's way quicker than he's ever been for, and he doesn't need to go that quick. He's a much bigger, stronger horse. You know, he won the Guineas. I'm personally still not convinced that Field of Gold was categorically the best horse in the race in the Guineas. I think Will Buick gave his horse the absolute perfect ride.
Yeah.
I think Kieran Schumacher just slightly missed the beat, but we're talking such minor fractions. But actually, Ruling Court just maintained his speed from start to finish in such a consistent way and stayed very strongly to the line. Granted, not quite as strongly to the line as Field of Gold, but, you know, that's a completely different conversation. And I think he should stay a mile 4. But again, he's another horse where I'm a bit, will he the same rhythm on Epsom? He was that green last season. Like, he needs to have really strengthened up and matured, which I think he does visually look like he has done. But, you know, he's been campaigned on very simple tracks. Sandown, York, Meydan, Newmarket. Granted, Meydan's a quicker track than the other tracks, but, you know, if he had any sort of greenness still left in him, which, to be honest, I've got no reason to think he would do, but it's just putting a, you know, devil's advocate point of Epsom is a very different track to Newmarket.
The question about him being able to stay, so in terms of pedigree and trying to get clues on that, Together Forever was beaten in the Oaks behind Qualify, so she didn't stay a mile 4, but she was considered good enough to run on it. Ruling Court Stam only raced twice, but again, she's by High Chaparral. Well, sorry, that requires context, actually. Not quite. She ran over a mile 4, we know, in Group 3 company in Keeneland, but I have no idea how many times she actually ran because the Racing Post database doesn't include it. There's enough in what he did in the Guineas and enough in the way Charlie speaks about him and on pedigree to suggest to me that a mile 4 is not going to be that much of an issue. And I do wonder at this very top level page, if people have copped on to the fact yet that in order to win the Derby, you need class, speed, and elite stamina. And there's horses who come into this race with stamina, but they don't have elite stamina. And the Godolphin horses, particularly this fella, and all of the Coolmore horses, they have the elite stamina, and the class, and the speed. Does everybody else have the ability to be able to get there? Like, you've got Pride of Arras is by a French Derby winner. Maybe he improves for a mile 4. I'm not so sure. The Gosden horse might very well improve. He's going to need to. But these Coolmore horses, they'll stay. And Ruling Court, we already know, has speed, class, and I suspect has stamina, enough to be able to get him through and win. It just doesn't make sense to me that if Aidan O'Brien trains this horse, he's favourite.
Yeah, I think that's, again, it's just the Aidan O'Brien factor that I think is putting everyone off. I'm probably biased because, like I said before, I think if Ryan rides Delacroix, like he is, I really fancy him because Ryan's picked Delacroix for all the reasons that we've already covered. But that Guineas win, and again, like before we went on air, we were talking about Field of Gold going from the English Guineas to the Irish Guineas, and he just made Field of Gold made some pretty good horses look very ordinary. And it kind of reflects the depth of that British Guineas. And yeah, I think I again, maybe we are going to get slightly into that Field of Gold situation, but I think that Will Buick quickened it. He let his horse travel into it really smoothly and just wound it up to a point where it took the speed out of Field of Gold. But Field of Gold wasn't able to use the turn of foot that he showed at the Guineas in at the Curragh because they had the field itself had been winding it up from far enough out, in my opinion, in the British Guineas at Newmarket.
And he was asked to quicken going downhill in the dip.
Yeah. But Will Buick was winding it up and he's got first run on Kieran. But actually that's because the horse was just rolling away and just maintaining that all the way to the line, whereas Field of Gold has that sort of sharp, like explosive speed, which he couldn't when Will Buick was just letting the pace roll on like he was, if that makes sense, any sense whatsoever. And I think you're right. I think, granted, he's not the horse that's hit highest top speed of any of these animals. That's Delacroix. Delacroix is the horse that holds the trophy for fastest top speed of all these runners. But it's that ability to maintain that speed, isn't it? And he definitely showed that at Newmarket. But I think it's just I think the Aidan O'Brien factor is just putting the jitters on all of us because we don't know what he's doing. We don't know how the form stacks up then because, as you say, he was beaten by Lion Winter at York. But I watched that back this morning and I was like, he's just not the same horse anymore. He was so green in that race. And they went so fast as well, over 7 furlongs. Yeah.
But it is also confusing for bettors in the sense that in the past you could just look at the Derby and go, okay, we're going to look at the Derby trials, we're going to look at what horses did as juveniles. If you didn't finish in the first 3 last time out, you've got no chance. So I can just draw a line through you, you're out. And the last 2 winners in this race were lapped in the 2000 Guineas, and then they both come on to win the Derby. And so that creates confusion amongst odds compilers, and it creates confusion amongst bettors because some of them are just going to take the attitude, oh, sure, Aidan's obviously going to win. He has all the best bred horses. He's the best trainer in the world. He's won this race more than anybody else. He'll have them ready. Yeah, those 2 horses were special, though. This horse may very well be special, too. But it worries me that Tom Siegel's of the opinion that he's a miler. You're of the opinion that he's a miler. You're not hearing the same level of hype about him as you normally do. He's not like Auguste Rodin. He was a Group 1 winning 2-year-old. He's not like City of Troy. He was a Group 1 winning juvenile. He doesn't have that on his CV. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he goes and wins. Wouldn't surprise me if he bolts up. Also wouldn't shock me if the race where you see him at his best first time this season is the Ascot Derby, and then like the really great performance comes from him in the Jumpman International. And there's a part of me almost thinks they're working back from that, but I have absolutely no proof of that whatsoever. There's a couple of horses in here at wild prices that we could talk about. Tornado Alert is one. He doesn't necessarily scream a mile 4, given the fact that he's by too darn hot, but he's out of a dam who raced in Australia and has produced at least one winner over 2 miles, another winner in Australia over a mile 4, and he was staying on really, really well on only his third ever start in the 2000 Guineas. And it would be some crack if Godolphin win this race, but the man responsible for it is Syed bin Saror, and Oisin Murphy has already been booked.
You know, I think with the depth of the other runners, I could definitely find a price elsewhere. No offense.
Syed, turn off the podcast. If you're listening, switch off the podcast, Syed.
I mean, he's not someone. He hasn't looking at the data, because he isn't a horse that I've actually even picked out of the field at all. He didn't stand out from the sort of overviews or anything. He's a horse that, you know, he hasn't necessarily got the speed, and he certainly hasn't proved yet if he's got the stamina. So let me just get the Guineas up.
Given the fact that Field of Gold has come out and won the Irish 2000 Guineas, now you and I were talking about this very briefly beforehand, and that we were talking about what kind of a renewal is this year's Derby. Is it a vintage race or not? And that it looks like a vintage renewal. And I was saying, yeah, the Irish 2000 Guineas look like a vintage renewal as well, but that's because I allowed myself to think all these unexposed horses might just give a bit of a headache to Field of Gold, when I should have just been like, there's one horse that towers above all of these and they have to come to his level. And if they do, fair enough. But Field of Gold will win. And I was too stupid to not do that. So maybe Field of Gold just won on class, but that was his first run of the season, his first run on turf, and he finishes 4th in a classic. And in the lead up to the race, Syed bin Saror was saying, we'll go to the Dante after this. And straight after it, he went, no, that's enough now, Derby.
Yeah, he's got too much. Considering that he's up against so many more battle-hardened horses that have so much more experience, I'm just not convinced. I think that run of the Guineas was fine. Like, maybe, okay, so I say he doesn't have the speed. Like, maybe he got short, you know, he got done for speed and then stayed onto the line. That is the data. What happened? He was the 7th quickest top speed in the 6th furlong of 39.43 miles an hour. To put that into context, Ruling Court hit 40 miles an hour. So it was half a mile an hour slower than Ruling Court at that point. And obviously just couldn't quicken with them. Let's have a look at sectionals as well. So he didn't gallop to the line as strongly as the others. But as you say, it's his first go on turf. You know, he's made the running. He's been a sitting duck for the rest of them.
Sitting goat?
Sorry. God, I'll tell you what, honestly, this has been a minefield. I'm like, there's too much. I love the jumping because the storylines are so, like, you know, traditional, and it's like I have all of this in my head.
There's a very clear narrative.
Yeah, and I'm like, now I'm like just completely all over the place.
Yeah,
I my head around multiple different form lines that link, but
and there's so many unexposed horses as well. I'm going to say I think he's very interesting, and he's going to feature in the exotic bets at the very least, and I might very well back him. I have a funny feeling I'm going to do like a really stupid each way double on Syed bin Saror walking away with the 2 classics this season, El Wateen in the Oaks and Tornado Alert. We already put it up on the podcast to pay 1,000 to 1 at the time. I think it's still value because it's such an open renewal, and he's such an unexposed racehorse. He's interesting. He's very, very interesting. And I think he's a much better bet than a horse like Nightwalker, for example, who, in my opinion, has no chance. Cue him winning the race now. And I'd be much more interested in him than the Gosden horse, Damascus or whatever his name is. I'd also have more interest in him than Lambourn, for all that Adam Mills is a big fan of that horse and put him up on the show not that long ago, but he'd need to improve as well. Okay, of the outsiders, who really interests you before we switch to the Oaks? So,
speaking of Damascus and Pride of Arras, just like to quickly touch on the Dante as well.
Yeah, of course.
Because, you know, what was interesting about the Dante was that they went quite steadily and then they quickened a lot. So I think that was quite a falsely run race. So I just can't read into them and go, wow, that win in the Dante or the second in the Dante was really deep. In Demesis, his fourth furlong was 2 seconds slower than his ninth furlong. And he was like closing on Pride of Arras all the time. But I think, again, I just don't think that form line rise. I think they just were a bit flattered in behind because, you know, they finished in bunch because they weren't so steady and then quickened. And I don't think in terms of form we can really read too much into that because of it, if that makes sense. But I'm actually, funny enough, as you may have noticed already, I'm slightly fond of Delacroix, pending Ryan Moore's jockey booking. That is a big caveat of this could be all of my sort of fancies could be completely blown up if Ryan Moore goes and picks Line and Winter, and then I'll be like, right, ruling court. But you know, Lambourn and Stanhope Gardens tie in really well with Delacroix's form, and I think Lambourn, I know how genuine he is, but he's a really, really strong stare.
Yeah.
And he's that horse of Aidan O'Brien's that I can see. I don't think he's good enough to win the race. I don't think he's got the class to win the race. But I do genuinely think that he has the ability and the staying ability to pick up the pieces at the end for a second or third place. In the Chester Vase, his fastest furlong the whole race was the final furlong. Like, he was literally only motoring at the end. He also was finishing a lot stronger than Delacroix at Leopardstown in March. Like, his sectionals in the closing stages, his final furlong was 0.14 seconds quicker than Delacroix in the final furlong at Leopardstown in March. So he was staying on stronger than Delacroix, and he was obviously second choice horse. So you've got Ryan Moore giving Delacroix a great ride in front, and the second or third string coming and getting him. Yeah, I just think that there's enough to say that he will be bang there at the end. So yeah, he's probably my pick at a price, I think. Again, I think Stanhope Gardens was another one who possibly just ended up in the trap behind Ryan Moore when Delacroix won the Autumn Stakes at Newmarket. Again, they've gone fairly steadily in front. You know, we're looking at sectionals, a sort of 12.66, 12.79, 12.66, quickened up all the way to 11.41. So Stanhope Gardens' final furlongs were 11.41, 11.1, 12.2. He just couldn't make up that ground. So they were really quickening quite a lot at the end. We already know, like I said earlier, Delacroix has quite a sharp turn of foot. And I think Stanhope Gardens has shown that he has that speed and stamina. And I just think he's an interesting each-way play as well. I know that he hasn't had a sort of typical prep, and he hasn't been tried over more than a mile, but I just thought he was quite interesting based on that second to Delacroix last autumn.
Yeah, for sure. The one concern I'd have is that he's a Rayath or a Gayath, whichever pronunciation you want to go for, who is a brilliant racehorse and is starting off as a very successful stallion. But he's a Dubawi, and these Dubawis hated Epsom. And he did win a Coronation Cup, but he won a Coronation Cup at Newmarket, so it doesn't count. But yeah, he's interesting. The Lambourn case you make, I think, is really solid. And again, we're just coming back to that. These Coolmore stallions have the elite stamina. If Lambourn ends up running in the Gold Cup in a year's time, you're not going to be surprised. Like, he's going to have that bottomless stamina. But that could help him in the Derby. And there's lots of horses. There's going to be a lot of horses rounding the final turn who are in contention. There's going to be a few horses in contention 2 furlongs out. There's not going to be many in contention when they're coming into the final furlong. There's horses are just going to pull away. And I suspect Aidan O'Brien's horses will be there. I think Ruling Court is going to be there. And maybe a horse like Tornado Alert can be too. We'll see. But I'd be much more interested in those. I think Ruling Court should be favourite. And so as we were recording, I would make him the pick because I think he should be favourite for the race. And it's sort of insulting that he isn't. That doesn't necessarily mean that by the time we're recording the full preview on Thursday that we'll have the final answers for you. But we'll get further clues from Martin Dwyer on the podcast, Derby winning jockey, on tomorrow's final furlong. Let's switch to the Oaks, or the Betfred Oaks, I should say. It's the Betfred Derby, obviously, as well. Desert Flower, again, for the boys in blue, a classic winner. This time heads the betting. She does get her flowers towards the top of the betting. She's a best price 7-4. Mini Hawk for Aidan O'Brien leads the top three in the betting for Coolmore. It's Mini Hawk, Giselle, and Whirl. So it's Godolphin versus Ballydoyle, or a Ballydoyle battalion. And then we've got Said Ben Saror, intriguingly, for Shadwell. Normally it's Godolphin, but this time he's training for Shadwell in El Wateen. She ran a huge race in the 1,000 Guineas in just her second start to be only beaten 2 1/4 lengths. Jim Crowley will be on board. And then there's a number of other horses towards the top of the betting. Is Desert Flower going to stay a mile 4 at Epsom, Paige Fuller?
I can't see why she wouldn't. I really fancy her. I think she's just a beautiful animal, and she definitely has the speed and stamina, in my opinion. I don't know what it is about Ruling Court. I really don't want. It's we've already covered this. We spent a lot of time on it, but I just feel a lot more impressed by Desert Flower than I do. And maybe it's because everyone came away from it going, Field of Gold was the better horse. Maybe that's masking some of it with Ruling Court as well. But Desert Flower was just so impressive, wasn't she?
And the form has been franked by Lake Victoria. Now, admittedly, that requires context. Aidan O'Brien was very, very clear Lake Victoria badly needed her first run of the season and that she would improve for it. And you could argue that the second and third didn't. They didn't really do a whole lot. So maybe the best horse in that race was Lake Victoria, who wasn't allowed to show it on the day because she couldn't. Or perhaps that's a really harsh thing to be saying about Desert Flower. I'm not so sure. This is a mile 4 at Epsom, and she's a Night of Thunder. Her dam didn't win over a mile 4. It doesn't mean that she can't. The confidence is huge. Her juvenile form was very, very impressive. She's unbeaten. She's exciting in that regard. But a mile 4 at Epsom is a mile 4 at Epsom. You need to stay. And I think one of the Coolmore fillies will do her. And I think of them, the one that interests me most is Whirl. Straight after she won the Musidora, Michael Tabor was saying, we're going to go for the French Oaks. No, she comes here. So they obviously feel like she's going to be able to stretch out to the mile 4. I was a huge fan of Giselle, and I still am. I really liked her visual impression of her performance at Lingfield, and I can't help but notice that she continues to contract in the market. Meanwhile, Mini Hawk is going the other way. So right now it looks like Ryan is going to choose between one of Giselle and Whirl. Maybe he ends up on Mini Hawk, we'll see. But as we're recording, we don't know yet. Of the 3 Aidan O'Brien horses, I really liked Giselle. The more close we get to the race, the more intrigued I am by Whirl. And I think there's a bit of substance to her performance in the Musidora. What does the RaceiQ data tell us about her?
So it's funny because when I first looked at the data, I was like, I think I prefer Whirl. And I was really impressed by her Musidora. I think she stayed really strongly to the line. She competed the final furlong about 0.3 seconds quicker than anything else in the race. She was galloping really strongly to the line. Granted, they went quick, then steadied up again, doing this sort of nice stop-start, quicken at the end. But it's that sustained speed she showed to the line that was impressive in the Musidora. She's obviously beaten Giselle before, but again, going back to that, getting the run of the race, even though it obviously wasn't Ryan Moore on that day, I think Ryan Moore might have been kicking himself after he got beaten on Giselle by because Giselle got stuck quite far back. They went fast through the first 2 furlongs, then they steadied it right up to, I think, put in a 13.26 second furlong in the fourth furlong, which is slow, and then quickened it right up to 11.5. Well, just 12.8 second furlong there, and her quickest furlong in this penultimate furlong was 11.18. She posted the quickest furlong in the race, but she just couldn't get the ground back. And so the more I looked at the data, I actually thought maybe the form lines of Wells weren't as strong as on paper they look like. And actually, Wells, surprisingly, is a very fast riding horse as well. So again, if we're thinking about that type of horse that might be better suited to Epsom, again, we don't know whether it's just a Derby thing or a fact that faster riding horses are less suited to Epsom. But that is sort of my gut feeling with Well. And she's just not. She's not very fast. I don't think she has the speed. She definitely has the stamina, but I don't think she's got the speed. Whereas I do think that maybe Giselle has both. But I don't like the Lingfield Derby trial or I don't like Lingfield as a prep race for Epsom. That's my only sort of concern. So
why?
Well, I think people get drawn into thinking that because they swing downhill into the straight at Lingfield that it's like Epsom, but it's just a completely different track. Lingfield's a lot more open and galloping. Like Epsom's obviously a bit of a galloping track, but it's not the same sort of bend. And I think people get lured into thinking that it's the same sort of track, and it's not. And the stats just don't back it up in terms of translating that form particularly well from Lingfield to Epsom either, I don't think.
I can't disagree with you on that.
But yeah, it's funny because I going into this, when I was doing my research, I thought Well was massively overpriced, and then the more I looked at it, and especially that defeat of Giselle, where you go, okay, well, Well's already beaten Giselle. Actually, there are excuses for Giselle.
Yeah, and to be fair to Giselle, she might have just bounced. She'd been off the track. Like her debut was behind the Bedtime Story. Obviously, sensational form. She doesn't come, that was June. She doesn't race again until October. Then on the 22nd of October, she's asked to take on Whirl, where she sent off an odds-on favourite. And she may have just been feeling the effects of that race. The talk was she was the best of the Aidan O'Brien juvenile fillies. Bedtime Story and Lake Victoria and Fairy Godmother were strutting their stuff last season, and the talk was Giselle was the best of them. Make of that what you will. I thought she was hugely impressive at Lingfield. Now, it's a 3-runner race. I understand your concerns, but the 2019 winner, Anna Perina, she came out of that race. It can produce Oaks winners. I would like the fact that she's already handled at least the undulations of Lingfield. It's a slight worry that she's a bit buzzy, that she has to wear a hood. There's all kinds of things to be a little bit concerned about, particularly when it's Epsom and it's going to be a big crowd. But I think she's very, very talented. I would imagine it's going to be between these two as to who Ryan rides. Mini Hawk was very, very impressive at Chester. Very, and that's a race that has worked out well in the past too. But I think the X factor is more with Giselle or Whirl. And Whirl was the one that was coming out on top. That being said, you've started swaying me back the other way. I wasn't necessarily firmly committed to either one of them. And the fact that she's a Frankel out of a Lope de Vega mare, like, I think people might look at Wootton Bassett and go, are you going to get a mile 4? But she's out of a sister to Hydrangea Whirl. So a mile 4 is within range for her. Wootton Bassett's are winning classics left, right, and centre as well. So there's no problem there. There's a lot to like about Whirl in that regard. And obviously Snowfall bolted up in the Musidora a few years ago before a very stylish performance in the Oaks. So maybe you're going to see something similar here. I'd have it between those two. I think it's between Giselle or Whirl. The only other one that really interests me, and she does very much interest me, is El Wateen. Jim Crowley, Syed Ben Saror, only the 2 runs. For her to do what she did in the 1,000 Guineas on her seasonal debut, first run on turf over a trip that may be short of her best, Very impressive. It's not impossible that Saeed Bin Saror walks away with 2 classics this weekend. That'd be some story. What do you make of her?
And you throw me a little bit of a curveball there just because she hadn't caught my eye, but that's not to say that, as you say, she's done very well.
I'll say this might come too soon for her, but she's a horse to keep very much in mind for later in the season if this doesn't work out for her. She's a very talented filly. And the Sectional Times boys were raving about her performance at Kempton in the all-weather.
Yeah, she is a really smart filly. She is a really smart filly, but she didn't handle the dip. To be fair, she probably ran into the dip, and I think she got a bit lost in the dip. She gave away. Was she the only horse not to? She was one of only 4 horses that didn't break 12 seconds. So all the sort of main contenders were clocking sectionals quicker than 11 seconds into the dip in the Guineas, and she's clocked a 12.02 second sectional, which to me suggests that she obviously ran into the dip, lost her way a bit, and then into the line. At least as strongly. Her final furlong time is the same as Desert Flower. But we're just going back to Desert Flower, and I just love her. It's a great segue into how much I just love that horse, because you can look at all the top speeds and stuff, and like Desert Flower, amazingly enough, in the Guineas, there was only one horse that clocked a slower top speed than her. So Desert Flower had 8 horses that went quicker than her in the race. And she just maintained her gallop so well to the end of the race. And I just think that that's going to pay dividends in Epsom. Like, she's a massive striding filly. Last season, when the pair of Desert Flower and Lake Victoria were running, Lake Victoria reminds me a lot of Porta Fortuna in her style of racing.
Yeah.
She's one of those horses who she can get the revs up, she can inject pace and maintain it, but she has to inject pace. A bit like Delacroix, that idea where they can quicken and they can stay, but they're not proper stayers at the same time, because they need to have it go that way for them. Whereas Desert Flower, to me, just looks so much more versatile because she uses her stride length. Like, all of her, in 3 of her 5 races, she had the largest average stride length because she can just jump and roll. But she's not just, she's pretty versatile in how she uses her speed as well. Where, when she won at Newmarket in her second run in August last year, she hit a top speed of 41.75 miles an hour, which is quicker than any other horse in this race. So you can go from winning your second race, hitting speeds like that, injecting pace into race and quickening away. But you can also win the Guineas, being the 9th quickest horse in the race, and just maintaining that to the line in a really efficient manner. And I think, like we mentioned for the Derby, that versatility from Desert Flower is going to be her sort of biggest asset around there.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I could look at a horse like We Might Take the Long Way, who beat Mini Hawk as a juvenile, gets beaten by Delacroix first time out. He goes on to win another Derby trial. There's 2 other horses in that race who come out and win Derby trials, and she's a 2 3/4 length winner of a Group 3 Oaks trial. And she's 20s for Joseph O'Brien. Like, who knows how much improvement there is to come from her. Daughter of Australia. She'll probably love Epsom. I'd be more interested in taking a swing at something like her or El Wateen at 9s, or one of the Aidan O'Brien fillies. And really, the Aidan O'Brien filly you want to back is the one who Ryan Moore is on. So if you can get the inside track as to which one he's going to choose ahead of time, then fantastic. Maybe she wins. Maybe she does. It'd be great to see it. It'd be great to see a horse remain unbeaten, Godolphin kick off the weekend, winning another classic. They're heading for the Belmont with Sovereignty. They're heading for the Derby with Ruling Court, and with the Tornado Alert. Like, there's lots to be excited about for them. I don't. Maybe this is just Field of Gold all over again, but I think this is a deeper race, and there's lots of horses who can improve. So I have yet to fully formulate my opinion on which one I will side with, but you are doing all you can to persuade me. Just close your eyes and back Desert Flower, Kennedy. It'll be fine. Betfred Coronation Cup. Let's just touch very briefly on that. Clandigan is going to be a red-hot favourite. He's going to blow the start again, but maybe it won't matter this time over a mile 4. Maybe he'll just go and win, but he is odds on. And Jan Bruegel was disappointing in his comeback, but that was over 10 furlongs on pretty fast ground on his first run of the season when the runner got free on the front end. He did show a horrible head carriage, but eligible to improve, second run off a layoff. I think he's very interesting. And I'd probably side with him, the classic winner, particularly given the fact that the St. Ledger form is working out quite well. But is Clandigan just going to murder them?
The problem with Clandigan is he just always excuse, doesn't he? Like, he should be the best horse in the race, but he just gets himself into all sorts of trouble all the time. And so, you know, my gut feeling, you know, you go back to his races and it's like, okay, let's have a look at York. Well, let me see. So many notes I haven't actually, my notes have been terrible. Your listeners will be like, oh my God, Paige, shut up. You're sitting on the fence and you can't get any of your thoughts together. Right.
Somebody at RaceiQ needs to get you a personal assistant. That could be an AI. No. It could be an AI.
No, not yet. We have TV, you know, down the line. Right, back to the Judamont. You know, he was 0.65 seconds behind City of Troy, half a mile from home. And you're stuck behind a horse that you know can quicken over this distance. You've got 0.65 seconds, which is about 4 lengths to make up. He hit 41.7 miles an hour in the next furlong, but he was never going to get there. Then you go on to Ascot, and he sort of, yes, he missed, but he's a hold-up horse anyway. Like, they know that he can't get involved in the race too soon, so he missed the start at Ascot. But would he not have just been sat where he was anyway? Like, he didn't have to use any energy to get into the position where he ended up. He just missed the start and settled at the back. He would have been doing that anyway. So I got is because of the way they were bunched up, he got dragged into the race a bit sooner than he'd like. And I think he had to use his kind of foot too soon at Ascot. And then he got tired up in traffic against Los Angeles last weekend. Obviously, Alma is one of those horses like Clandigan that has to just have one run, and that's that. So, you know, there's that issue with Clandigan again in May again, and clocked 3 sub-11 second furlongs in Maidan when he was beaten last time because he was just rattling home. But I can't back him because I know that he's always going to leave himself in trouble. And there's a reason why he keeps failing in our Group 1s, because he's just not quite. And I think Jan Bruegel is just a really likeable, Coolmore type who can just gallop and run. He's straightforward. As you say, he got beaten over mile 2 last time. You know, he's back up to mile 4 today. He never got the opportunity to run in the Derby or anything last year because obviously he must have been a pretty late maturing horse, because actually in everything else he looks like a horse that would have been running in the Derby had he come to hand quicker. And I think I agree with you that he, to me, seems the obvious answer in this race.
I'm delighted you agree with me on this. It's entirely possible that Miguel Barcelona just comes there laughing at us on Clandigan and he just goes and wins. It's also entirely possible that Miguel Barcelona continues his thing of wanting to come there fast and late and stylish. He needs to be a bit of a show pony. And that's not going to work against Rymore at Epsom, son. So I hope you hold him up as much as possible. I hope you're coming with your stylish, slick late run, because Moore will be gone. And we know this horse can stay further. I think Jan Bruegel's a cracking bet. And again, these Aidan O'Brien horses are improving from first to second start. That 3-year-old crop is starting to look, from last season anyway, the classic crop from last year. Like, how many people, I was saying this to you before we came on there as well, how many people were bashing Los Angeles and Illinois last year? Oh, they're no good. Form of the Derby's are rubbish. Saucy's looking very good in France. Illinois got top-class form with him. He's now favourite for the Gold Cup. Los Angeles is 2 from 2. May very well go and win a third Group 1 at Royal Ascot. This Jan Bruegel form is looking pretty decent to me. I think he's very exciting. Unbeaten in 4 starts last season, a classic winner. You're getting 4-1 about him against an odds-on favourite who is going to blow at the start. Admittedly, he might get there, but I smell an each-way patent page, and the first leg of it is Jan Bruegel. That's what I smell. Okay, what are your selections for us for the 3 races for Epsom this weekend, according to RaceiQ and your good self?
So my 3 selections, because I've beaten around the bush enough today. I'm going to put up Giboletto actually each way. I think you should get an each way price for him, hopefully.
Oh,
Yeah, I know, controversial.
Left field.
In the Coronation Cup. I think Desert Flower wins the Oaks. And I think Lambourn will be placed in the Derby.
Okay. Right now, Jan Bruegel, Giselle, probably ruling court at the moment, but I have a sneaky feeling that's going to change. I don't know. Paige, pleasure as always. Where can Final Furlong Podcast listeners and viewers get more access to RaceiQ data?
Exactly. All of the RaceiQ data is now available on the Racing TV website in the results section. You just have to click through some tabs, which is great. And hopefully we will be rolling it out more this summer. And look forward to seeing what everyone makes of it. I think the sectionals in particular, everyone's familiar with them. We're obviously not the first people to do it, but that access to all races on the Racing TV website to look at the sectionals, all of those bits we were talking about clans again and stuff, people can make up their own minds, which is quite nice now. So hopefully you don't have to listen to me waffling through it and making a complete meal of it like I did today.
I don't think you waffled at all, and I thoroughly enjoyed your company. As always, Paige, it's a pleasure chatting with you, and please God, we'll do it again over the summer. What's the next one we can talk about?
Well, that's a good question. I think TBC.
TBC. All right. Maybe Irish Derby, Glorious Goodwood, something along those lines. We'll figure it out between now and then. Paige Fuller, find out more information about RaceiQ at the Racing TV website, and of course follow Paige on X and the RaceiQ data page on X as well, which I think normally people are more interested in you following them individually. Paige is more interested in you following at RaceiQ, RaceiQ at race_IQ on X. That's what she wants you to follow. And if you would be so inclined to follow her as well, great. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Final Furlong Podcast. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I love talking to Paige about the RaceiQ data. It's always insightful, and I hope you've enjoyed it too. We will talk to you again with Martin Dwyer and our usual crew for the weekend preview, all to come on the Final Furlong Podcast. Until then, look after yourself and each other. God bless.
In horse racing, every furlong matters and every episode counts. So stay ahead of the field by hitting subscribe to the Final Furlong Podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms. It's free and it gets you one step closer to the winner's enclosure. Subscribe to the Final Furlong Podcast and join us on the gravy train.